And a very warm welcome now to TalkTV's international editor, Isabel Oakeshott. Good morning, Isabel.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. It was brought to a sudden halt last night's debate, but we were getting somewhere, and it was far more revealing than the entire hour-long BBC debate on Monday, which preferred to focus on the dress sense and fashion sense of the two candidates and didn't get to any of the real issues that matter. Of course, the really big issue that matters is taxes. Rishi Sunak seems to be very rattled by Liz's low tax pledges, and last night did what was called a screeching U-turn and announced he would cut VAT on our energy bills. Is he running scared, do you think, Isabel?
Well, yes, he is, and absolutely so disappointing that last night's debate came to such a dramatic and abrupt end. But as you know, sometimes you get more out of a couple of minutes of good TV than you do out of an hour of guff. And we certainly had no guff last night from our very own TalkTV debate. In the short time that both of the candidates were behind their podiums there, we learned actually rather more than we have almost to date in the campaign. I thought there were a number of really startling things that came out of it. You're absolutely right that Rishi Sunak is somewhat panicking. I mean, he doesn't look like he's panicking, but suddenly announcing a new policy about cutting tax at this stage of the campaign is quite extraordinary. I mean, I know various people that were on the inside of his campaign, as I do that are on the inside of the Truss campaign. And I said to them from the outset on the Rishi campaign, look, you can't win this by promising more of the same. You can't win this by a prospectus of gloom and sensible economics, as he would frame it, telling us all that we need to put up not only with the high taxes that we've had already, but also brace ourselves for more of that. I don't think really anyone votes for that kind of prospectus. But inside the campaign, the view was, well, you know, Rishi has presided over the economy these last couple of years, and therefore he's got to own it. And furthermore, they privately say, look, this is what he genuinely believes. Well, the problem with that is it isn't going to get him to number 10, so he isn't going to be able to implement it. And now some pragmatism is kicking in. They realise that they're way behind, and they're sort of trying to frantically pull tax cut policies out of the bag. It's the worst of all worlds. You can't kind of go one way and then go the other when it looks like you're in trouble, and that's what exactly he's done.
Yes, I had one of Rishi's leading lights in his campaign, Alexander Downer, on my show on Monday, and I advised Alexander and his cohorts to abandon this approach, which seems to declare that Rishi is innately intellectually superior to Liz Truss. He kept saying to me, Rishi has the intellectual capacity to be the Prime Minister. I said, what? So what are you implying? That Liz Truss doesn't? So that seems to have been wisely abandoned. Also, the other thing that was abandoned last night was Rishi's tendency to keep interrupting and shouting over Liz Truss. So he is changing pragmatically as he goes along, but he's trailing badly among the Tory party faithful who will vote for our next Prime Minister, 160,000, 200,000 of them come September the 5th. And the other area where he's trailing is, of course, on energy policies. He wants to stick to the green levies, keeps talking about his children and his grandchildren. And I really hope his children and his grandchildren have lovely lives. But right now, Rishi, I'd rather you concentrated on us today. This is a mistake. This is wrong of him to keep saying we have to charge you a lot now because of my children and my grandchildren. That's another faulty approach to this campaign, wouldn't you say?
And he also said that in his household, his children, you know, are the leaders on climate change issues. And I thought, well, frankly, I really don't want a 8-year-old or a 9-year-old telling him what to do on this. And you know, look, our children have collectively have been somewhat brainwashed about this stuff. I mean, I'm not a climate change denier. I would go to the ends of the earth to try to reverse the decline of species, in particular the loss of animals and so on, which I think we all care about. But the net zero agenda is not good for our country in the way that it is currently being implemented and in the timeframes that are being imposed. And we can see, you know, most householders see the impact of it on their bills, all these green levies. And finally, last night came something quite sensational, I would say, which was this massive U-turn on positions on fracking. Now, fracking is the method of extraction for shale gas, and calling it fracking somehow makes it sound scary and negative and dangerous. Let's talk for a minute about shale gas, this enormous resource we have here in the UK. So much potential there to bring our own energy bills down by, guess what, producing our own energy. And to date, all efforts to do that have been stymied by the Green lobby, and by the way, with the help of a lot of vested interests, quite possibly Mr. Putin and his very sophisticated methods of making it look like he's got nothing to do with the resistance to fracking in this country, because, of course, he wants to maintain our dependence on him. So the government up until now has been anti-fracking. They're very frightened of backlash from communities. Last night, what was extraordinary in the TalkTV debate is that both candidates said that they would support fracking with community support. Now, that might sound like a really big proviso, and perhaps it could be. It certainly gives them a get out. It all depends what constitutes community support. And over in America, for example, where fracking and shale gas has been hugely important to them developing their own energy security, communities that are in the vicinity of any shale gas operation are offered really substantial discounts on their energy bills for long periods. Now, my guess is, at the moment, if you went round a village and said, guys, if you support this thing that's a couple of miles away and isn't going to have any real impact on you whatsoever negatively, you'll get 50% off your energy bill for quite a long time. I think we'll find that those communities would absolutely support the development.
Yes. Isabel, we're going to get to Donald Trump in a minute, because you are, after all, the international editor, but we were just talking about fracking. Let's remind ourselves of what both candidates had to say in the TalkTV debate last night.
I need to ask you first, Liz Truss, fracking, yes or no?
Yes, if local communities support it.
Rishi Sunak, fracking, yes or no?
Yes, if local communities support it.
Yes, and as you quite rightly said, Isabel, if you dangle some money in front of these people, as they did in America, you'll find that their objections to fracking will dissolve. And certainly we need to dismiss that ludicrous objection that unfolded in 2019 when the government effectively accepted the ridiculous suggestion that fracking in Lancashire would trigger an earthquake in Blackpool. And we only have to look at Germany now to realise that for some time now, the European countries, Western countries, have been sold a total fantastical lie about green energy. And that needs to stop, doesn't it?
Look, this has been disastrous. Germany is facing real crisis now because it's pursued this absolutely insane policy, which has left it completely exposed to geopolitics. And, you know, the kind of naivety of politicians never ceases to amaze me, or I'm sure all of our listeners. You know, it's not rocket science, is it, not to leave yourself exposed to the Russians at this point? But, you know, the Germans have been cozying up to the Russians for a long time. They've had various very, very senior political figures there, now slightly out of the public eye, but essentially doing Putin's handiwork. And now, you know, they are paying a very desperate price for it, and as we all will. And I think that it was very exciting what happened last night in relation to fracking. It's interesting that today's papers have pretty much ignored that revelation. We could see something of a conspiracy there, if we like. Certainly on the left, nobody really wants to talk about fracking. They pretend to go along with the idea that this is going to cause catastrophic earthquakes, or rather just pretend it isn't happening. But I think that it's up to those of us who care about what's happening in the energy sector, and that is on behalf of everybody who's now suffering, trying to pay their bills, to really hold whoever becomes the next Prime Minister to account. And let's keep referring back to that pledge that they made on live TV last night on TalkTV.
Absolutely. And let's also remember that Liz Truss has pledged to slash, maybe even get rid of the green levies that we have to pay on our energy bills to fund Boris's carbon net zero fantasy by 2050. And that we pay 25% of our electricity bills goes to that, and 8% of our total energy bills go to that. And that is not acceptable. And Rishi needs to climb on board that wagon as well and stop droning on about his children and the future of the planet, because we need help right now. Let's go across the pond, Isabel, and talk about Donald Trump. A barnstorming speech in true Trump fashion yesterday in Washington. Let's play a couple of clips and get your take on it. He had plans for drug dealers. He had plans for the homeless, which is getting to be a massive problem in America. Let's have a listen to the Donald.
It's time to get brutally tough on the dealers and traffickers and narco-terrorist cartels who are stealing over 200,000 American lives a year. And that's a very low number compared to what the real number is. It's a very low. Think of it, 200,000. You don't lose that in wars. You don't lose that in wars. And yes, these drug traffickers should and must receive the death penalty. And I'll tell you, just from dealing with the heads of other countries, I said to President Xi of China, do you have a drug problem? No, no, no. Why do we ask such a question? No. He almost didn't know what I was talking about. No, no. I said, why do you think? Well, if somebody is selling drugs, they get the quick trial. Letting people live in the street of a major city, or anywhere for that matter, with needles, drugs, squalor, is not good for anybody. For the good of everyone involved, the homeless need to go to shelters, the long-term mentally ill need to go to institutions, and the unhoused drug addicts need to go to rehab, or if necessary, an appropriate jail. They've taken over our cities, so many of our cities. It's at a level that nobody can even believe. But wherever they go, surrendering our parks and sidewalks to people that in many cases are crazed, very sick, it's just not an option.
Isabel, I kind of miss Trump, don't you? Is that a speech of a man who plans to run for president again?
Oh my gosh, I hope so. I'm sorry, I'm going to annoy a lot of people by saying that kind of almost gave me the shivers. I know that he says some crazy stuff, but look, I love the way he talks. He just communicates so directly with people. There's none of this fancy stuff. There's none of the pretense. He just says it as many people think it. And that is absolutely at the heart of his success. So far from being a poor communicator, because we know the Washington elite always likes to ridicule the way he spoke, I just think that when he delivers those set pieces, it just resonates with people. You can just picture what it is that he's getting at. And I've missed him. Sorry, I just
So have I.
You know, when he put out that statement earlier this week about, as he put it, Sleepy Joe and his COVID, it was hilarious. You know, he just lightens life, doesn't he? And we don't have to agree with everything he does to recognise some of those qualities. And frankly, I don't believe for a minute that President Putin would have done what he's done in Ukraine if President Trump had been in power, because he was simply too unpredictable for foreign despots to take those kind of risks. You never quite knew how President Trump would respond. And that was the heart of his genius in a way. He was criticised for his unpredictability. But if you are a despot, if you are a rogue regime, you are not going to take chances with someone who might, just might, go absolutely nuts in a way that you can't quite anticipate.
Absolutely. And when he talks about the homeless there, like, for example, he's really hitting home with Americans all over the States because in my old hometown, Los Angeles, homeless people, they come in back from the coast, 10 and 20 blocks full of tents in people's backyards, in their front gardens, all down their streets. And the local police, because it's a Democrat city, the police aren't allowed to move them on because that would be inhuman. So he is hitting home. He is talking to the people.
Yeah, and this homelessness is quite shocking when you go to certain American states. I'm always struck by it. In Seattle a couple of years ago, it was very striking, actually, the legalization of marijuana there. It's a whole other debate, but, you know, the streets were full. Frankly, I'm not exaggerating here. There were a lot of spaced out people staggering along the streets and an awful lot of people sleeping rough. And, you know, yes, in the UK, we have a homelessness problem, but it is nothing compared to what you see in certain parts of America. And it is quite shocking. And every American, I think, will be able to relate to what the president was saying there.
Isabel, fantastic to talk to you. A real pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. Isabel Oakeshott, international editor of TalkTV, there talking her characteristic good common sense.